Hi, folks, and welcome to the fifth episode of the Virág podcast. It's my massive honor today to chat to Virág Gulyás, a prominent figure in the advocacy for Israel and Zionism, both in Europe and in the US. A proud Hungarian, Virág is really keen in separating facts and fiction from the way her country is usually exposed in the mainstream media. She is also very vocal in telling on how much her life path has reshaped her views of society and the road. So stay around to learn more about her journey. And please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. It's very helpful to distribute my content. I will see you in a sec. Hi Virág, welcome to my podcast.
Hi, Victor. Thank you for having me. And I really appreciate your intro. That was, as a good journalist would do it.
Yeah, I try to capture it all because I had so much in my mind for the intro or for the upcoming hour because I think we had we have a few things in common that we can explore in this interview, and maybe there are other people out there who have things in common with us and they can benefit from this conversation. So I'm like genuinely looking forward for this, and yeah, I cannot wait to start this chat. So.
Let's dive in.
Uh, I would like to know, just as a starting point, because I know many people know you, especially people that follow Zionist online individuals like yourself, and who are in this, let's say, in this environment. But not everyone in my audience is that familiar. So, how did you become the almost Jewish from Virág, who grew up near Budapest, to the almost Jewish? So, if you can take us through the trajectory, I think that's a great start.
Okay, I will give the outline. So the almost Jewish makes most people smile, but I also met a couple of Jewish people who didn't appreciate this gimmick that I came up with like almost a decade ago now. The whole thing for me was absolutely nothing disrespectful. It's like this is how I could identify myself, someone who is not Jewish but should have been a Jew. And hence the almost Jewish, because my soul is definitely feeling something that I can't express with my mind. And also, I'm so attached to the whole Jewish traditions and culture and to Israel. So yeah, I think God made a little mess above us, when I was born. The natural question is always whether I did the DNA test. Yes, I did. Worst day of my life, because who doesn't have 0.01% Ashkenazi blood in herself in Eastern Europe? That would be me. So nothing, Klum. But what my DNA does show is the whole trajectory of the Hungarian history, from the Ural Mountains and the Turks and the little Finnish, so like that. But to focus more on your question, I don't really think we go on certain life passes without other people's impulses and involvements in our life. What do I mean by that? I met an Israeli guy when I lived in Brussels. So this is how my story starts. And it didn't end there, even though the relationship ended. But I often say when I meet with, young people on college campuses, but even elderly, that the way we act, it's always a result of something of an outside trigger. So if we talk back a little bit, I grew up, I was born in 85, so everyone can do the math. But when I was growing up, there was no internet, and there was a level of tangible anti-Semitism in society. I can only say this today, at that back then it was totally normal for me, and I didn't really understand. I didn't question the Jewish jokes and the Jewish stereotypes. It was not hatred, but in Hungary there are three types of main jokes. One is about the Jews, one about the blonde women, and one about the gypsies. So the Jewish jokes were around me. And so when I met this Israeli fellow and we started to date, he took me to Israel very quickly, and I started to question my own things, like, oh wow, I can't really say this joke because it's actually hurtful. And so I really was self-observing, And eventually I wrote an article about it. I might have been an anti-Semite. And these are hard things to say out loud. You need a lot of not only chutzpah and in a way bravery, but also self-awareness, and be able to know that, okay, it's not necessarily my fault. I was a product of my environment, which was this, the jokes. You only knew about the Jewish people, what you saw in your proxy. And for me in particular, that was, since you have lived in Budapest, you know where the Dohány Street Synagogue is. Just a street beside that was my classical ballet school. So my projection about the Jewish community was that everyone is an Orthodox Jew, and that's it. So it was not a conversation among our classmates who is Jewish or who not. And only now, and to be more honest, like in my mid-30s, I started to think back on my classmates. And I was like, oh, I think she was Jewish. Oh, I think he was Jewish. But it was taboo. Nobody talked about it. Whereas now in the United States, I meet someone and the first thing is like, oh, are you Jewish? Are you not? But if you are asking this in Hungary, it's still a little bit like, are you counting us? Are you, collecting the name? Like lots of collective trauma. So my journey was not happening overnight, but it definitely started with an Israeli guy. I give him the credit for that. But the rest is a lot of work on my end. And I think it really shows that we are able to change our stereotypes on other people, but it takes a lot of work.
Yeah. So we are on the same generation. That's another thing we have in common. I'm from '83, so the way we were brought is very different from people these days. And I don't want to look like a grumpy old man here. There are advantages back then. There are advantages now. It's just a different context, and that's the way it is. But we wouldn't have our lessons from a screen. We would have our understandings from life, from what we would experience ourselves. And that's something I think we like to keep. Of course, we do research. We watch plenty of YouTube videos and podcasts and all that. But we try to see things with our own eyes. And I think it's something you do. And probably that's one of the reasons why you are still in the US, because the US it's a place full of events, some nice ones, some not so nice. It's US. It's too big to be just beautiful or just to be ugly. It's just impossible to reduce to one adjective.
I love your diplomatic skills here. Like the way you are phrasing it, it's really nice. Full of
I'll be popular in the US, at least for one reason. So you are seeing things firsthand, and I'm very interested in how are you perceiving what's going on in America, especially in universities, because from Europe we can see things on the internet, we can hear from friends, but you are there, and you are not just there. You go and talk to them, so you are the right person to tell the audience what's going on.
Again, whenever I talk to people, I always say, you don't need to believe me. And what I am trying to encourage people is to think for themselves, So if you question something I say, go after it yourself. What I can tell you is that I'm definitely less diplomatic than you are in general. And even though since I've moved to the US, which has been now 8 years ago, my language softened, but I'm still a very Eastern European non-PC person. So that causes me a lot of trouble in that sense. But to answer your question, what we are seeing in the US, specifically focusing on campuses, it's not something new. So what we see today is, a heightened attention given to the campuses, but we had these things prior to October 7th. Yeah, we didn't have these encampment setups, but we did have Apartheid Week where they were saying, death to the Jews, death to the Zionists on Columbia campus in particular. I attended the Apartheid Week there not once, and they even refused to talk to me as a non-Jew simply because I have talked to a Jew before asking them. And so for me, those were all wake-up calls, how there is zero intention to have a dialogue. And, me as an activist, I went through my own kind of like waves. In your 20s, you want to change the world and you are okay to be aggressive and loud. And you believe that the more loud you are, the better your chances to convince the other person. But then with age, you mature and you understand, it's not how it works. It's a lot of psychology. So For the last couple of years, I spent so much time really meeting with people who think totally differently than I am, and we had heavy conversations. In fact, since I moved to Boulder, I met a person who is from Gaza City, and we spent 3 hours locked in a car, both of us really, really trying hard to have a conversation. Even though he is in the US, he's still really not having a good opinion about Israel. And I'm not going to, disclose more about his private life out of respect. But he is really not friendly towards Israel, but he has no problem with Jews per se in America. That was one of the hardest and toughest 3 hours of my life. But I appreciated that he also tried and I also tried. And then October 7th happened. And my appetite for this kind of heavy conversation definitely shrinked and almost disappeared at one point, because I can say about myself, like I felt so much frustration, anger, even hatred, how people really question what went down on October 7th and how this whole got twisted. And it's troubling because you lose your faith in humanity. And, I'm not even Jewish, but I'm a vocal Zionist. So most often than not, people assume that I am Jewish. Like on Instagram, most of the comments would be towards me as a Jew. Go back to Poland, you dirty Jew, and so on and so on. So I do feel this hatred and Jew hatred on my own skin, even though I'm not Jewish. And just 2 days ago, I actually gave 2 lectures at the University of Denver. And then I did go out and checked out the tents, which now already, are here in Denver. And I had a conversation with one fellow who is a big supporter of this encampment, so seemingly anti-Israel. And since October 7th, this was the first conversation where I was okay to have the deep conversation. This guy and myself, we disagreed on most of the things, but he at least tried to listen. He didn't scream, he didn't yell, he didn't, go violent. And here is my takeaway. Literally, he spelled out that the IDF is or was partaking in October 7th. And he feels nothing is wrong with this statement, which is literally to going along the lines when, they said that 9/11 was an inside job of Israel and the Jews. So basically, October 7th has the same kind of ideology around that Israel created this in order to wipe out Gaza. And there you are standing and you're like, what is the right answer? So my answer was, that first of all, is extremely far-stretched assumption. And also, everything of this is going against the Jewish values. Jews value life. And the Jewish communities are still struggling to get to the same level of population as they were before the Shoah. So no Jewish community in their right mind would sacrifice this amount of people for something of that. And that would also require you to glorify death for something so it's everything is going against the Jewish values with this assumption. The other thing that we can see on college campuses, is here, not in Denver, but in New York, for example, the violence and how it is normalized. But it comes a lot from social media and how we normalized hatred and open violence and the call for violence against Jews and Zionists and their allies for years. It's been for years that, things on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and Twitter could circulate that people are literally showing you how to stab a Jew. And that was okay to be on these platforms. So this younger generation grows up with this normalized hatred. And then, the first moment they get a chance, they put this on the street as well. And this is why they are so kind of brave to say, you should be killed. And they say it into the face of a Jew in New York City without fear and consequence, a fear of consequences. How we got here, obviously, it's manifold, starting from the hijacked education system, which again is not an anecdote, it's a proven fact, how much money Colombia and others got from Qatar and countries which from a Western point of view are absolutely not aligned with those values that we fought for and our parents fought for. So that is in and of itself a problem. And then add to that this new generation's attention span, which is around 3 to 5 seconds. So they don't go into the details. They hear the good slogan, like from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Which river, which sea, nobody cares. It sounds good. I'm going to be famous by saying this. And with this, we go to the third big thing, the psychological effect on this, because today's generation, if you ask them, what do you want to be? Most of the 19/20 something years old are going to say, I want to be famous. I want to be rich and famous. It's not like I want to be a lawyer or doctor like our parents. No, I want to be famous. How can you be famous today? If you're riding the waves of the given algorithm and the given trends. So today, tearing down a poster of the kidnapped kids made you famous. And they don't care how they are getting famous for or what they are getting famous for. And also this generation, as opposed to yourself and myself, they grew up with such a level of comfort that most of them don't even understand. So in America, I really am having a hard time with this discussion over privileges, because here the privilege is primarily between white people and people of color. But myself, who grew up in under the Soviet Union as a white person, I don't find myself privileged. So for me, the biggest privilege in the world is to be an American. And they don't even know it yet, or this generation at least. Their biggest problem is, which of the latest iPhones to get and when, which college to attend, which car to get. And so it's a problem, because they don't have anything higher than themselves to fight for. And every smart psychologist and rabbis also talk a lot about this. Unless you have something bigger than you in your life to work towards, you're going to be lost, hence the depression and so on. So these people now, these young people saw a cause which from the outside seems so easy. There are poor kids who are dying in Gaza. Obviously, your heart goes out to those civilians and the kids, but they did not go into the cause and casualty effect and, what caused and how did we get here. And so this is in a nutshell. I could, give a whole lecture about this, but these three main pillars, in my opinion, are a big problem that we are seeing with the young generation.
Yeah, there's a lot of contradictions. Like if you examine what is the structure behind the society they want to put in place, the educational system, even social media, how they are used as a tool. It's full of paradoxes. It's like again, we can give a whole lecture about it. And I will give an example here from Ireland. So there's a football team here, football as we think in Europe, not soccer, which is a word I hate as a big football fan. There's like all the football teams here are very much pro-Palestinian or pro-Hamas without them knowing. But some are more than others. The one that is really keen on justice and equality and all these slogans, brainless slogans, is a team called Bohemians. So the other day they scheduled a match between their female football team with the female football team from Gaza, and they say this is a match for democracy. And it turned out that all this Gaza football team will come up with not with hijab, but with their faces very much covered, and that's probably one of the symbols of oppression against women. So I don't know how can they not figure it out that they are not partnering with the right people for that purpose, but they don't see it. And if you call it out, all they will tell you is that you are Islamophobic, that you are a white person who doesn't care about the rest of the world. So I also think that most of these people don't take the time to think what's going on. They just accept what they see on the news. They just assimilate whatever they are told, and life is good. So I think that's a big division between those who take the time to understand things and make their own conclusions. Sometimes they are right, sometimes they are wrong, because they're real human beings, and the robots, automats, who just accept things. And I think most pro-Palestinians are on the latter.
Talking about this face cover, I don't know if you have seen that video in which in London, they are asking young women to try on a half hijab and to see and experience it for themselves. And these young girls are happily doing that, and then they are posing in that. And as you said, there is so much contradiction, but also a level of cognitive dissonance that I can't even digest. Like, I don't understand. This young generation, as I said, and I keep on saying, this iPhone example, because it's the truth. When Apple comes out with the latest iPhone, look at them. They are there pre-ordering it like days before, but they would imagine or even consider living in a society where you need to have a hijab, where all you are doing here is shopping for the sexiest clothes ever. And so the other thing on this same merit, at Columbia University, there was an imam when in the heightened moments. And these American kids joined behind him for a Muslim prayer, which in and of itself, before anyone drops again the Islamophobic thing on me, is not a problem. The problem is that it happens on a college campuses under the pretense of free Palestine. And we all know that the statistics show that, in America, the young generation is less and less likely to continue going to the church, let it be Christian or like in Jewish faith, so much interfaith marriages. So religion is something to look down in this society today. And yet, when it comes to an imam and a Muslim prayer, people are almost like putting it here on a pedestal, like as if, and now it just comes to me, this thought the first time since I'm spelling it out, as if you would need to feel guilty of something for something. Just like during the BLM, if you remember, there was a moment when white people were washing and kissing the leg of Black people on the streets of New York City. And that is mind-boggling to me, because it's like, we are talking about equality, but that's not an equalizing moment. Then you're literally just putting the white people below you. And here the same. It's like somehow this whole Palestinian cause became such a tokenized item, and that no rules that we apply for any other minority groups or any other war situations apply to this. Every rule, let it be legal or PR or personal opinion, we just change them because it's the Palestinians. They can't do wrong. They are all good. They are all innocent. And I'm like, something is really, really twisted in this picture.
Yeah, very much. Like again, that will be enough for a lecture or for a few lectures. Like we could be here forever. But I'm very keen in knowing, how do you find yourself as a non-Jew fighting for the Jews? Because I'm non-Jewish myself, and I make it public. Sometimes a bit awkward, but I'm very interested to see what's your experience, because I know there are positive sides and negative sides. So I don't know. I leave up to you to start with the positive or the negative. And I know it's another topic for a lecture, but we'll try to make everything in one piece in the end.
All right. So that's a very interesting question. Nobody ever asked me that. So thank you for that.
Good.
It's not only the positive, negative. It's also about whether I'm among Jews or among non-Jews. So let's start with non-Jews. So when non-Jews hear that, I'm such a vocal person towards the Jewish civil rights or towards Israel, most of them just literally say I'm crazy, or they have zero idea. They don't understand what I'm doing. That's fine. That's an easy thing, I can explain, and that's opening for a discussion. When it comes to the Jewish communities, I do highlight the fact that I'm not Jewish, and it has two reasons. One, they very easily make you feel at home and make you among them. But I always felt like I am lying if I pretend to be a Jew among them, because I'm not. And so when they treated me like as a Jew, or assumed that I was a Jewish person, it hurt me as Virág, because I still felt deep inside that I'm an outsider, even they didn't make me one. So I clarified it for my own sake. And then I also say that I'm not Jewish simply because the Jewish community is very justly so, but very vocal about how non-Jews are not supporting them. So whenever I go to an event, I make sure that they know that at least one non-Jewish person is here. And so how they react to it is very awkward sometimes, such as you said. It's something I don't think they understand how awkward they get. When I said last time at an event that I was a non-Jewish person here and it was already after October 7th, the answer was, oh, that's fine. I like everyone.
Yeah, I saw that one. Yeah.
Yes, that post got a controversial response on social media from me. But if you think about it, that person probably didn't mean it in a bad way, or let's assume.
Yeah.
But if I would say to someone who comes at me that, hey, I am Jewish, I would say, oh, it's fine, I like everyone. That would be almost like a slight anti-Semitic remark. But somehow when it's towards non-Jews, you saw many of the comments were like, oh, many of the comments were very rude also, like, just get over yourself, or why you take so personally. I'm here not to show only my opinion as Virág, but also to represent a non-Jewish community within the Jewish, sphere or talks. So I don't think they know how to answer. What would be the appropriate answer in my eyes? Just say, thank you for being here. And that's it. And with that, we acknowledge the fact that, I took the time and effort as a non-Jew to be there, and we all like each other. So like, there is no distinguishing factor. But yeah, sometimes it can be very awkward. And I think since most of my, talks or interviews are with Jewish people, this question never really comes up. And there are so many different occasions when I do cry and they don't understand that they hurt me. And it's not on purpose. It's the same way like I didn't understand that I was an anti-Semitic person. They also don't really see the reverse things. Like in New York City, I dated a Jewish guy, American Jew, and I was super honest and transparent. He literally said out that we can have sex, but he could never date me because I'm not Jewish. And I was so hurt. And so many people try to justify, but you need to understand. I was like, I don't need to understand. If I would have told you as a Jewish person that, hey, I can have sex with you, but I can never marry you, I would be headline anti-Semite on the news the next day. These are things I can't really talk about because I don't really know how, but they hurt me deeply, even though I understand that why this guy wants or chooses or needs to marry a Jewish girl. That's fine. But the whole situation, I'm still a human, and that often gets forgotten. Somehow I just need to, and that's a delicate point of my activism, that I am liked as long as I'm saying what everybody wants to hear. And then the moment I go into these little more sensitive topics, it's very controversial. So from one day, the same people can like me, and the next day they are the ones who are trashing me from here to China. And that's a very sad human situation where we are now, that we assume that we need to agree on everything 24/7. What a pressure we are living under right now with this assumption. We don't need to agree on everything, and we still can be friends. Nobody agrees on everything with anyone. It's like I have
thank God.
Yeah, thank God. But somehow, think about it, what we see on social media and stuff. The moment you are not agreeing on the tiniest things, you are out, you are canceled. And I'm often thinking about it. I disagree on a lot of things with my parents, and they are like the closest in DNA and mindset to me. So for me to assume that with strangers we would need to agree on things is just a weird society we have built up here.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
No.
So to make it more complicated, you mix Zionism with dating, and dating was nowhere in my mind. But I think now that you brought it to the table, I will also discuss that with you. So when I lived in Hungary, actually, I have a whole book is written in Portuguese. It's not translated to Hungarian or English yet, but maybe will happen at some point. The book is called Beside the Danube. It's about the time I spent in Budapest. It's composed as every chapter is a girl I dated there. There are a few. I don't want to grab here.
You did that. I wanted to write that book myself from my perspective.
You're on version. Yeah, I write the introduction if you're interested. So the one of the things I did was when I was dating a girl, okay, I was not looking for a Jewish girl. A Jewish girl will be a plus because there are a lot of things on Jews that I resonate with. So no issue with that at all. But if there will be an anti-Semite, I wouldn't be very interested in dating. I could have sex with them because I'm a guy. Let's be honest. Guys are like that. If it is to get off, sorry for my language, we don't care. Let's be honest. That's the way we are. So I probably wouldn't care. Maybe for one night, I'm going to be like authentic about it. But that would be it. Probably I would just ghost her going forward. But I would raise a couple of questions in the beginning to see how much could I be involved with that woman. Because one thing I never do is cheating or lying on purpose. I might hide a couple of things because they're not relevant, but I would be as authentic as possible. So I would raise some questions to the table, like, have you been to the Jewish restaurant in 7th District? See how they react. If they say, I would never go there. Jews are taking over Gaza and they are killing people. Say, okay, you'll never be my girlfriend. And I would also ask about politics. Is there anything you dislike in Hungary? And some will say, I dislike Viktor Orban. And I'm like, yeah, maybe that won't be my girlfriend either. Yeah, maybe we can meet 2-3 times, but I know that going forward we'll have issues. So I raise these issues, or raise these topics to the table, just to avoid the two of us wasting time. And,
Sure.
and I think it makes sense. So would you do the same? I know you have a boyfriend now, but would you do the same in the past, just to see whether there was something on the way, some barrier, or
100%. 100% sure. Without being so judgmental, but some girls are checking your wallets on the first date. I was checking whether you are, aligned to my values. And since I was 15, I have not dated a Hungarian up until this point. So like for 20 years, I had long-term relationships also. But jokes aside, I was very much like not in the Hungarian dating pool, so more like Israelis. And for me, I couldn't even imagine not dating a Jew or not marrying a Jew for the future. I really tried not to date a Jewish person for a very long time. And whenever I went out on a date, I understood that they're not going to support what I'm doing, or they're not going to understand. And I really always thought that I'm going to end up in Israel. So I was also very hooked on having an Israeli guy. But then again, it's really complicated, because if I lived in New York where this happened, and the American Jewish guys had this thing that, they may have to marry a Jewish person. They promised it to Sabo and Safta, so that's the way it is. Fine. For the Israeli guys, it was never a problem that I wasn't Jewish. But it was such a small pool of people at the end of the day, who are like, okay to date a non-Jew and some. And then after that, the politics, because even among Jews / Israelis, there are people with certain politics that, they would go with JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace, or something so much far on the left that is not something I can align myself with. So when people ask me, isn't it hard to date someone from a different culture? My answer was always, the culture enriches you, the differences, if you are with the right person. And I could not date certain Hungarians because they are so far away from me and my values, politics, religion, spirituality, everything. So the compatibility eventually comes down to these values, because once you have a child, it's extremely hard. I know people who can do that, but I could not, who are like, super right and super left and let's raise a kid together. For me, it's unimaginable, because the way you raise your kid, it's really a reflection on your values. So definitely it was like the first date icebreaking thing. And in fact, when I had a period when I was on a dating app, it was clearly said that I'm not Jewish, I work with Jewish communities, you cannot be a Nazi if we are dating. So like I tried to be, I literally spelled out, if you're a Nazi, don't even swipe right for me, like no. And then eventually God made a joke on me. currently I am in a happy relationship with a Hungarian non-Jew. And just for the joke of it, it's when he asked me out, I was like, "You're Hungarian and you're not Jewish. I don't think I can go out with you." And he's like, "What's wrong with you? You're Hungarian and not Jewish." I was like, "You don't get it." So, I was so fixated on something, and slowly but surely with him, I understand why we need to let our ideas go, because fixation is not a good thing. Like, I was really fixated on ending up with an Israeli guy, moving to Israel and stuff, and maybe it could have been a beautiful life for me also, but I see the benefit of how aligned we are culturally, politically, and everything with this person. And above all, he's the first who understands what I'm doing and why I'm doing, and he supports me. So yeah,
that's the best. That's the best. That you don't need to check his wallets if he's supporting you that much. There's no need to go. Actually, my mom does that. I hope my girlfriend doesn't, but as far as I know, she hasn't started. I think she has no reasons for that, at least. But it hasn't started. If she watches this podcast, she might. But we'll see. I'll let you know if she was inspired by that or not. So, how do you see the current Hungary from far? Because you probably visit, I don't know, a couple of times per year and try to spend some time there with family, revisit friends. How do you see it, and how is for you to be there for a week or two? How do you find yourself there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, when I'm gonna say what I'm saying, people are gonna say like, "Oh, she's weird," but this is how I am. I am a super proud Hungarian. I'm extremely patriotic. So you say something bad about Hungary unjustly, I'm the first to stand up. And yet I'm not living in Hungary. So people are like, "Yeah, how pretentious that is." Well, what I can tell you that I did not find myself and my career path in Hungary after I stopped being a classical ballet dancer. I tried, I moved back. I lived in Switzerland where I was part of the opera house, and I moved back to Hungary. I didn't find my place. And at that given moment, Hungary was still in the mindset of, to be very clear, the HR person asked me, if you stop dancing, will you stop this job as well? And I'm like, what kind of mindset is this? And then I went to New York, and people are like, oh my God, you had this heart and bravery to stop dancing. That means you are this and this and this. And I was like, that's what I want. So for me, it was the mindset. I do believe it changed, but back then, people grow up with one career path for the rest of your lives, one marriage for the rest of your life, even if you're unhappy. So that is why I left Hungary, because somehow the opportunities came to me not from Hungary. And yet I'm in love with my country. I'm extremely proud. March 15th, when we put the tricolor in Hungary, even if I'm in the US, I put it out and I'm like proud. And so that is me. My Hungarian heritage is extremely important to me. And so when I visit now, obviously these are visits, but I'm still a Hungarian citizen. All my family is in Hungary. I have a registered address in Hungary. I have a home in Hungary. So I don't only go home just for quick visits. I'm usually home for like a month. And for the first week, I legit feel like a tourist. I have one girlfriend who is still sticking to me from Hungary, regardless of the distance. She calls me literally like the worst. Like, I go home and I'm like, what happened here? How do we be? What? So she retrains me to be a Hungarian for a week, and then I'm fine. So this is like on a cultural aspect. On the bigger picture, like politics, it's again putting me in a hard position, because in the US, whenever I say I'm a Hungarian, especially and in Jewish circles, there are many reactions. Number one, oh, Hungarians, you are the anti-Semites. That is like engraved in the narrative like really badly. And the other thing is, oh, you guys have so much problem because of the fascist dictator. And it's again such an awkward situation, because people immediately assume that if I'm Hungarian, I need to hate Orban. And this is ad absurdum for me. Like, I never assume of an American whether they are for Biden or Trump or whatever. But for me, everyone starts the conversation as like, oh, you probably hate Orban. And I burst the bubble out very quickly. I don't hate Orban. And for that, again, I get, bad and good and whatnot. I think Mr. Orban is doing an amazing job in a very, very, very tough times ever since he is leading the government. And when people say that he is a dictator, I tell people back that basically with this statement, you called millions of Hungarians stupid. Because that would mean that two-thirds of the country, including myself, we would have voted for Orban simply because, and we all are stupid. So to imagine that Hungarians would do that is so degrading. And so I tell people, if you don't believe what the New York Times is writing about Israel, you should not believe what the New York Times is writing about Hungary either. So you can't just cherry pick. And whoever never been to Hungary, again, I discredit them for their opinion immediately, because you can have an opinion, but you cannot be so arrogantly confident about your opinion if you have never been to Hungary. So you're saying, that he is censoring the news and stuff. Let me tell you, there is way bigger censorship in the US right now than there was ever under Orban in Hungary. And Americans are very, I'm generalizing, so obviously not everyone, but many Americans don't even know what went down in the Soviet Union. So again, if you would understand the psychology of that, you would know that the Hungarians would never let anybody oppress them ever again. This is exactly why Orban is going against a lot of the decisions that the EU in Brussels is imposing upon us. Because we know what it means when someone from above tried to delegate, oh, you can do this, you can do that. So I am thankful for the current government and their work, especially that I can benchmark. I can see what's happening here, and I could see what was happening in Brussels, where I lived for 6 years. So for Orban's, harsh policy against the illegal immigrants, right now, I assure you, most people are jealous of it. But when he made the decision, he was everything, from a Nazi to the fascist to everything. And right now, people are trying to copy him because we see the consequences of those mindless actions back then. So do I agree with him on everything? We said before, I don't need to. I don't need to agree on everything. I need to agree with the general direction, and for me the good outweighs the bad with them, and that is how democracy works. So I am actually thankful for them, and if I were a Jewish person, I would even more so be thankful, because right now Jews are safest in Europe, which is not a personal opinion but a fact, supported by statistics as well.
I remember queuing for the Yom Kippur, not ceremony, service, the word is service. And, I lived in Western Europe most of my life. And I was shocked that the presence of the police was very small. Like you had to look for them. They were there, okay, they were there. Yeah. But there were like 3 or 4 policemen, that was it. And maybe a car, maybe. I think I saw a car, if I'm not wrong. But maybe we're just passing by on the way to the police station. I don't know. But the presence of the police was almost none. And I remember telling that back then I had a Jewish girlfriend, because I was similar to you also, had this thing of having a Jewish girlfriend, maybe changing my life radically on that regard. And then I also realized that doesn't make much sense. But let's set that for another time. The presence of the police was so small that I couldn't believe. I remember we were on the queue, and it took some time to get into the synagogue. So I was even curious to see if there was some. So I've spent like 20 minutes trying to count them, and one hand was enough to count how many police people were there. Now, as we know, in the US, in Western Europe, it's totally different. I think the police would outnumber the number of Jewish people queuing to the synagogue, and that tells a lot.
100%. Like in New York at rallies, sometimes it's like more police than the Jewish people who show up. It's a good point you are pointing out. Very few people acknowledge that. And, you can say a lot about, Hungarians are like the anti-Semites, but these are the facts on the ground that you need to check. When a Jewish community can go for a Shabbat service or a Yom Kippur service without much protection, maybe not even a protection, because there are synagogues all over, the country, that means they feel safe. Whereas in Brussels, the last couple of years before I left, the Jewish community literally had tanks around their institutions, and these big stone walls so that nobody can just put jam a car into the institution. And then also in New York, for the largest synagogues, you need a massive police presence. So that is huge. And if you see in Hungary, I'm never going to say we don't have anti-Semites. That would be too, pretentious of me to say. We're never going to kill anti-Semitism. It's in the human nature to be hateful towards other minority groups. But what I can assure people that in Hungary, it really manifests in verbatim. So people will say a stupid Jewish joke. Does it feel good? Not. But such as the stupid blonde women jokes don't feel good for blonde women, we get over it. But Jews won't be stabbed, won't be thrown out of the window like Sarah Halimi in France, and ever since 2 other senior in France. So there is different level of anti-Semitism. And when people say that that's stupid to say, that's really not stupid to say, because which one you would choose? A society where, maybe a lame joke is on you that, oh, the Jews. Do you know how many things I get on degrading jokes because I have an accent, or because I'm this, or because I'm that? It's a human nature to be an asshole, for the lack of a better word. But you're not going to be looking behind your shoulders when you have a kippah on, whether someone is going to stab you or not. And just last week, we had the March of the Living. Maybe you saw a couple of videos. Once again, I pointed out on the same thing that you did. Where is the police presence? You barely saw anything. And definitely there was no counter protest with giant pro-Hamas statements. Simply didn't exist. Hundreds of people were marching peacefully with the Israeli flag. Show me one American or Western European city where that could go down now.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
No, it's not the case at all. I think the choice is very easy. If you are given 2 options, one is being object of a joke, and another one is being stabbed, I think everyone would prefer to be object of a joke. Like I wouldn't think twice, because a joke takes 10 seconds, that's it. If I'm stabbed, maybe I end up in the hospital. Maybe I'm not going to make it. So throw me all the jokes. It's all good. It's all good. So it's part of the culture. It's fine. Why do you think that drives anti-Semitism as such? Because it's kind of specific hatred towards groups, and there's hate towards all the groups. Like Gypsies are hated, Americans are hated, French are hated, Chinese are hated, Russians are hated, Jews are hated. But Jews, I think, are hated in a different, a different fashion. What drives anti-Semitism, like universal level, in your opinion?
Look, I need to be humble here and say the pure fact that way smarter and bigger people than I am couldn't answer your question. So how could I? I can spin my own take on that. I really think the more time I spend in this sphere, the more I feel that it's really driven by jealousy today. But back then, in the medieval ages and even before, it's really easy to hate what we don't know. And something controversial that once I posted about, and I got so much shit. And I called out the Jewish community for not knowing your own history is not to be blamed on me. Here is what I'm talking about. I have a master's in Jewish studies, and at one of the courses we did learn actually how a medieval Jewish history, it was not so bad for the Jews, even though everyone says it was the Dark Ages. It was not. And actually the Jewish community started. They had the shtisels, so like the little villages that they created for themselves, and they put the lock on it before they got locked in. So what it means that they wanted to keep their heritage. They didn't want intermarriage. They didn't want, to lose their mishpacha and family and traditions. So they created these communities within the cities. And then because this was super odd for everyone else, obviously they got picked on. That's how bullying in high school starts. The little bit different you are, everyone is on you. And so when I pointed that out, people were like, oh, so you are blaming the Jews for anti-Semitism. I said, I did not say that, but it is part of history. And you need to understand, you did nothing wrong. You wanted to protect your own heritage, but that also drove a natural psychological reaction from the people who were not Jews, that they looked at you as, oh, you are the odd one. Obviously, the blood libels and everything, came up as a bigger manifestation of this. Oh, look at the odd one. But so to answer your question, it's really hard to say. As I said, smarter people than I cannot really explain. Everybody has different opinions. But today, I definitely think that Israel's strengths, Israel's beautiful missions and the way they operate and interact with others and as a country and both as individuals drives a lot of anti-Semitism, even under the pretense of anti-Israelism or anti-Zionism. But again, if it's anti-Israelism, why are you killing and hitting the Jews in America? So, obviously it's anti-Semitism. And it's a lot of jealousy.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the argument you get, oh, Israel is so rich.
Yeah.
Well, Israel made itself to be something. And everyone has the opportunity, especially today. It's a free world, go do better. So that would be my short answer to you, that today it's definitely a lot of jealousy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a factor. Like probably there are a few others, but I would agree with you 100%. I think the jealousy is a huge one because, like, let's be honest, most of us, the vast majority of us, at some point in our lives, felt bad when the neighbor was doing better than we are in the current moment. Like we hate to see the neighbor's Ferrari when we are driving a Fiat. Simple
Right.
like that, right? And the best way is to understand, is that your race? Like, I don't even have driver's license, like when it comes to cars. So I know you just bought a car. I know, just bought a car. So congratulations, by the way. I bought a house, so I have something. So
congratulations. And you really don't have a driver's license?
No, I don't have a driver's license, which was actually, going back to the dating topic, that was something that I always put up front. If you want a guy that drives, it won't be me. So if they would walk away, then okay, I know what was the reason. Yeah, I was very upfront about. No, I don't fancy cars. It's kind of strange now for guys. Like I hate cars. I hate DIY. Actually, my girlfriend does all the work, so I pay for some because we just moved to a new place. I really hate like pragmatic things because I'm very much intellectual and creative myself. So I know what I'm good at. So it's not a matter of despise or this is like peasant job. I just think that the roles of men and women should be the same as team. No, everyone should do what they're better at, because
You
then it's best value. No,
yeah, for sure.
Yes, like someone is better at, I don't know, negotiating the energy bill, then I do it because I think I'm relatively good at talking. So I just go on the phone and I speak for like, I don't know, 20 minutes with a salesperson and try to get the best deal. I wouldn't dare to cook.
Okay, next time you are hiring you to do that for me, because I don't do that.
No problem. We can arrange a deal here. So I think it should be that. You should understand what's your position, and if you are not trying to strive, let's say countries, like neighbor countries of Israel, they have no aspirations. They live in the Stone Age. They are only going backwards. So if your neighbor is investing, if your neighbor is risking, if your neighbor is learning, developing, expanding new skills, just accept that, and that's fine. Don't just curse on what they are doing or try to stop them. It's and I think it's real for everyone else. People hate to see Israel progressing as country, and the economy just booming, despite all the peace issues they have.
For sure.
Despite all that, because if we will have the problems they have, we will starve. That's the reality. We will be at the most, we will starve.
100% sure. Like, I was in Israel through JNF USA's volunteering program just after the war broke out, a couple of months after, actually. And I go to Israel, and even though obviously you could sense the tragedy, these people were still going and doing and surviving. And when I talked with a person who was from one of the kibbutzim and lost dozens of friends on one day, and she said, of course, I'm in pain, but I need to wake up and I need to do. And then I come back to the US and I feel like people, even if there is no Wi-Fi for 1 hour, people are ready to lynch the other person. So it's like the difference. And something, let's mention here that's often disregarded as a fact, the creation of the Palestinian people as such. So yeah, they were Arabs, but Palestine and Palestinian identity, we both, I think we are on the same page on this, that it's a contemporary invention, so to say.
Yeah.
So from the 1960s, there was a people who did the making. And why? Because they saw that deserted little place that prior to that was literally nothing under the British Empire and the Turks and stuff. It was desert and desert and desert. There is this group of people who can make it strive. They bring in water, they become rich from this poor land. And again, jealousy kicked in. So they said, okay, we are a people here also. We lived here and we want this. We want part of this. But the moment they got Gaza City in 2005, which now could be the second Dubai, and people are laughing when you say that because, again, they don't know that it really could be. So they were, served on a silver platter, this richness. Even that got destroyed. Because why? It goes back to what you said. As a human being, we can be jealous, but sometimes we get what our neighbor has. And because we don't have the abilities, we just destroy even what we got. So for me, it's super important to emphasize to people that the Palestinian people, if they would really want it, they could have such a good life by now. But somehow they enjoy, and I'm very careful with this word, enjoy this victimized situation.
Yeah, it's awful. I know you're close to 1 hour, but I don't want to let you go without asking you this. So you were in Israel recently, I think a few months ago, and it was after the barbaric attacks of the 7th of October. And again, you did something that most people should do, especially when they write so much on the press, which is going to the field and see it yourself. So how was to be in Israel and actually on where the attacks happened and witness with your own eyes the tragedy?
This was my 26th trip to Israel.
26?
I was there in 26.
Wow.
And yet it was something I won't forget ever. It's kind of like my first one. I will never forget. So I was there in January, and the different emotions that I felt within 1 hour is undescribable. So from one hand, my love and happiness of being in Israel, and then meeting the Israelis, and they immediately give you this incredible strength and wanting to leave, and they had joy regardless of the traumas. And then the next moment you meet a survivor, the next moment you see the kibbutzim, the next moment you see the burned down buildings, and then you are taken back to reality. And this is how every hour and every day was like. So when I went back from there, I flew back to Hungary, and for 2 days I was just sleeping. I'm a very emotionally sensitive person, regardless of the job that I chose to do, but I was emotionally tired. So it was extremely rewarding, but also very heavy, especially I think on people who are not Israelis, because unfortunately Israelis grew up with this. There was a terrorist attack, there was a shooting, life goes on. They go to the funeral, the next day life goes on. How many of the people who were at Tonova and they survived, the next day they were called in to go into Gaza as part of the army? This kind of like big latitude of changes is something that an Israeli is so used to, but if you're not an Israeli, you can just admire this level of strength and adaptability. So I highly suggest to everyone to take the opportunity, whether with an organization. There are so many missions. JNF is very close to my heart. I'm also associated with them. So I went with JNF USA's mission. Look into that. Regardless of your age, it's a good fit. And there are so many other organizations as well who are giving options. But even if you have been to Israel before, then I suggest you can just go alone and check it for yourself. And you're always going to find something to do if you want to do something. If it's your first time to Israel, I would suggest going with a group, because it's not the time to discover Israel alone. But yeah, it was definitely, I felt like, I'm part of history, not in a cocky way, but like you felt like it's a war and I'm here and I'm on the farms and I'm getting my hands dirty so that farmer will survive and the Israeli economy survives, because I can't go and fight the enemy. So I'm doing my part this way.
Oh, that's powerful, Virág. That's really powerful. Like you try to contribute in the highest way that you could based on the person you are, your skills, your abilities, your reach. So I think you just couldn't go any further. Otherwise, you would be doing something different. So that's I think it's powerful and beautiful. So I think it's an example. Another example that I think people can think of is every time there is a terror attack in Israel, and unfortunately there are more than we would desire. Not as many as there were like maybe 15 years ago or 20 years ago, especially on the streets, but they still happen. And let's say there is a terror attack in Dizengoff Street, which I think there were a few. There was an attack, let's say, on Sunday. Monday, people are just packing that coffee shop is packed with people. Instead of staying at home and saying, okay, let's give it a week, let's give it a month. No, they go there for two reasons. One, to support, I think, the business owner, to say you are not on your own, like this place won't collapse. And the second is to send a message to these motherfuckers, because there's no word except that, those motherfuckers, that we will not bend. We will not bend. We are here. We live together, and we live in peace, democracy. We respect freedom. We respect diversity in a way that you don't, and the West doesn't. Although they preach something different, but we need another hour for that.
Right.
And I think it's a great lesson. It's really a great lesson. So I always feel devastated when I see a terror attack in a place where I was. So when it happened in Dizengoff a few years ago, like I had a cup of not coffee, because I'm more into alcohol myself. That's why I live in Ireland, no? And I was having a few beers there, and I was like, "You are invading my space, like you fuckers. You don't deserve any respect." It's very, very disturbing when you see that. I had a similar experience, though it's not as tragic as a terror attack. But I was walking, talking about diversity and all this BS. I was walking by one of the most beautiful parts of Dublin. There's a canal there with water, with green areas and all that. And now it's full of tents with refugees. Okay. And why are they there? And it's the government's fault to put them there. Like, why are they there? And that's a place where, again, I had beautiful memories. I was there with my friends. I went for walks. I wrote. There are other places where they can be. So I think it's very, very, very disturbing to see our places being taken over. And that's, I think, I would say something that you can resonate, because we are nomads, both of us. We are not just sitting on the couch and checking Twitter. So we saw the road, to the best of our ability. So we will be hurt in a way that others won't. So maybe I think that's one of the reasons. That's why I want to kind of close with that. But I also want you to speak before we drop, that you deserve a huge platform, because you are on the road. You are seeing things with your eyes. You are transmitting your ideas, thoughts. You get things right. You get things wrong, like everyone else. That's the way it is. So I think you deserve the audience you have, or maybe a larger one.
For me, I that's another topic, and a lot of frustration goes into that. How easy it is to become someone on social media, and how people can just buy followers and likes even until today, and that gives them credentials, whereas there is zero substance behind it. And I'm very careful about not to be put into the influencer category for that matter, because what I'm sharing and what I know, has tons of sacrifice behind that, tons of my money for my education, that I had to save up and do, my work experiences, my own personal struggles. And I don't really care how many people follow me, who hates me or who not. I'm trying to strive on those beautiful messages that I get, which, comes from various people saying, because of me, they were okay to go to Israel for the very first time to visit, or because of me, they went to Hungary and discovered their roots, or all these things, So even if one person has a little bit of a changed life because of something I said, okay, my work is done. And I wouldn't be honest if I wouldn't say that. Obviously, it's frustrating sometimes, that very silly comments and news are getting viral attention just because it's sensationalism and stuff. I understand this is how the world operates now. I'm trying not to get on that ride and be authentic to myself. But yeah, I always hope wherever I go, it's a beneficial interaction in a way that they can learn from me and I can learn from people. And with that, I'm gonna say that this was one of my best talks of podcast, and your questions were so good that thank you so much for bringing all this up in this discussion. Really, thank you.
I'm delighted. I'm very confident that the people out there, we are not a large crowd, but I think we are growing. I started this thing in January, and we have already some community. So I hope people can at least think about it. Maybe I can make my way to Israel. Maybe I can make my way to Hungary. And by the way, you can fly from Hungary to Israel very cheap. So so if you are on a budget, I recommend that. It's easier to fly from Hungary to Israel than from many parts of Western Europe. I miss that, actually. One of the things I miss from Hungary is the Wizz Air flight for 20,000 forints,
right.
or maybe or even less.
Wizz Air is not kind of stopping their things, or that was in the news. They are trying, but then there is still Up El Al, which is like the smaller version of El Al. So Hungary is still like an easy hub to Israel, that's for sure.
So people pack and go. See it with your own eyes. Write your articles. Do your videos. I mean, use the format that suits you, but see it by yourself. There's no better way to understand things than be there in presence and have face-to-face conversations with others. There's a huge benefit about talking to random individuals, just to see how things are and what they can transmit, because they are there every day. So I hope this conversation was inspirational, and I'm delighted to enjoy it. I'm very, very happy that we managed to talk, the two of us, because we had a couple of interactions by DM and all that. So look, I wish you best of luck, and I will be following your stuff with a very, very same interest, or even higher after this chat. So all the best.
Guys, thank you so much, Vitor. And if anyone from the viewers have any questions, I'm always available. And if anyone needs any kind of help, I'm also available. So we are in this together. And thank you again for the opportunity.
Great. Okay. Take care. Bye. Bye.
Bye.